Alright, hello economics students. So in this video we're going to look at negative externalities. Remember, the definition is when there is a cost, which can be quite broad, a cost which is imposed on third parties, basically the rest of society or someone else in society who wasn't involved in the consumption or production, that is imposed on those people. Alright, there's a cost imposed on society. Now I want to start out by thinking about a little example. So let me show you what this looks like. You decide to have a big party at the start of the year, but you only invite economics students naturally, and of course it's free, goes all nights, it's amazing, everyone has a great time, so much fun, Harry Styles is playing. Now, let's think about this in terms of an externality problem, because there are some costs to you to set up the party, right? You've got to pay for the drinks and the food and the setup, but there are also some costs to society. Okay, there are costs to people outside the party who didn't get invited, like your neighbors and the people walking down the street who have to, bear the noise and the smoke and all the costs. Now, what happens if things change here? If we get everyone to pay a tax that is charged to compensate local residents for the noise and the smoke and the fact that they can't sleep and work the next day? What happens in each of these scenarios? What do you think might happen if this tax is imposed? So I'm giving you a little insight into the government intervention side, of course. But let's dig into the failure. So again, a cost imposed on third parties who are not involved in the transaction. And what we're going to say is that the social costs, so that is the private costs, the cost to set up the party, the cost to get everything there and send out the invites and whatever, plus all the noise and the lack of sleep and the smoke and whatever else, the bottles. The social cost is all costs together, and they're obviously going to be greater than the private costs, okay? So when the social costs are greater than the private costs and they're not taken into consideration, we say that negative externalities are over-allocated by the market. So there's too many resources being allocated to these negative externalities, okay? It means they're overproduced. We have too many parties. So let's look at some examples and really dig into this. Of course, we have a power plant here. Now, I've recently learned that this is these emissions, or these kind of plume of smoke that comes out of these power plants here. Apparently, this is just steam, and it's not as bad as I once envisaged. But of course, whenever you turn on the electricity in Australia, Victoria, majority of our power is coal-fired power that releases carbon emissions into the environment. Okay. Whenever you turn on the electricity, sure, you have to pay a private cost to the electricity retailer, but you also are imposing a social cost, which is the carbon into the environment. However, you don't take into account, in a free market, in a perfectly competitive market without government intervention, just like at the party, you don't take into account the noise and the lack of sleep of your neighbor, you don't take into account the emissions when you turn on the electricity. Again, we're imagining a world where there is no taxes. Uber Eats, I think, is another kind of contemporary example because it can create a lot of traffic. You can sit at home and you order some food perhaps, and somebody goes and picks it up. How amazing is that? However, the Uber drivers park in the street where the restaurants are, and that imposes a cost. It creates some traffic. It means there's no parks for other people. However, you sitting on your bum at home ordering the food, you are not paying for that cost on society, okay? So the social costs are greater than the private costs. Petrol is another example. Driving around, again, creates emissions. You get wherever you want to be, from A to B, or to school or work or uni. However, everyone in society bears the cost, okay? So how can we solve these negative externalities? There are many different types of negative externalities. They're on production and consumption. What are some ways, again, you live in the real world, and I've sort of alluded to these. There are government interventions, I don't think about Uber Eats, but there are government interventions on petrol and carbon emissions. Just like there's a tax imposed in that silly example about your party, the government imposes a tax to account for the social costs. All right, that's negative externalities. Bye for now.